Hello again. Today we're going to have a little history lesson of the Combs soldier tradition. Actually, it started in the early 50s to mid 50s, and about once a week my aunt would come over and she would bring two figures from the 5-cent store, and one would be for me and one would be for my brother, and they had no rhyme or reason. She just picked up two of whatever she happened to get a hold of. Well, one of the first ones I had was a Rell. Now, Rell's a very inexpensive piece nowadays for collectors, but that was probably the only set I ever had. And I did have a set of these Rell cavalrymen with the wagons and so on and so forth. And other things I might have had were Timmies. She might have brought a couple Timmies over, one for me and one for my brother. And we built our set by what she brought us each time. If we would get real lucky, she'd bring us over a Marx figure or two. Now, when we decided to play with them, we'd get them out. The pirates, the Indians, the Germans, and people like that were on one army. And the soldiers, the cowboys, and the good guys were all on the other side. And my brother and I would set them up, and we would get our ammunition out. And this was our ammunition, rubber bands. And we would sit and shoot rubber bands at them and knock them out, knock them over. We got pretty good at shooting them, and we could hit them from about 5-6 feet away across a fort that we'd set up. We had wooden blocks that my uncle cut out for us. They were about this size, and we would make forts out of them. And then we would shoot the soldiers over with rubber bands. This is how I got my start. Well, this went on until I got probably 7th, 8th, or 9th grade, and then I kind of lost interest in the soldiers, and they got put away in a box, and I didn't see them for several years. And then later on, one day I was, I'm an auctioneer too, incidentally. I was at an auction, and some metal soldiers came up. Well, these were much older than any of these guys here as far as when they were produced. They were Barclays and Man Oils and things of that nature. But the soldiers there was about a dozen of them. They came up in the auction. I thought, those are pretty neat. And I bought them, and that started my collection. And like I said, I've got about 4,000 of them now. And I started out as a purist. I just collected Man Oils, Barclays, and that was it. And then I got to the place where only the most expensive and rarest ones were still out there that I didn't have. So I expanded my collection, and I started adding gray iron to the group. And then from there, I went and got some Marx tin flats and things like that. And then I got wild and crazy, and I started collecting any figure that I just kind of liked. And then I would get accessory pieces too. But like I say, I never had a complete set of any of the figures growing up. And actually, later on in life, I never collected sets. I did buy some sets at Toys R Us later, some of the Alamo sets and San Juan Hill and some of those, and I'll show those in a future viewing. Excuse me. But anyway, this all led to my collecting of buying those 12 soldiers. So the 12 soldiers that I bought, I brought them home, I put them on a shelf, and I thought they're pretty neat. And I showed them off to my wife's cousin, and he kind of liked them too. But I didn't tell anybody else around about it because I thought, it's not very manly for a grown man to collect toy soldiers. But I would go out and I would pick one up here and one there at antique shops, or you never found any yard sales, but you might find them at flea markets or things like that. And I had my collection up to about 50 pieces. And like I say, I didn't show them off to anybody because I thought, it's not right for a grown man to collect toys like that. And then one day I was reading a Tri-State Trader, and I read in the Tri-State Trader about the Toy Soldier Collectors of America were going to have a meeting in Chicago. And I thought, there must be other people out there like myself that actually collect these things. So there's a fellow by the name of Bob Horning, who's a really nice guy, and he makes some wonderful metal knights and paints them, and he's great. But anyway, Bob wrote the article, so I sent him a letter and asked him about it. He told me about these mail auctions and all these different places that people had these toy soldiers, and that got me rolling on it pretty good. And I found out that they have toy soldier conventions and shows and so on and so forth. And that's where I got my start. Going back to my original group, I met a guy in Cleveland who collected the rubber figures or the vinyls, and I collected metal, and he and I struck a deal where we traded. I traded all my old ones from childhood, which weren't in very good shape because my brother and I used to have a habit of wanting to chew on them a little bit. I don't know why we did that, but we did. But we never stuck pins in them or any of that stuff. But anyway, these weren't the greatest shape, but we traded. He traded his metal ones for my vinyl and rubber ones, and that worked out pretty well. But so I don't have any of my original childhood figures left. Everything I picked up from about 1977 or 78 till the present. And my wife has a saying when people come in and look at them: if you pick one up and look at, dust under it before you put it back. And when you got 4,000 of them, it does take a good while to dust under them. And probably in the years I've been collecting, I've dusted under these soldiers maybe 5 or 6 times. A couple years ago, my wife had the idea, it'd be a good idea to switch our bedroom and my office soldier room around. So I had to take every soldier off the shelf. We had to move the things to the opposite room, and I had to set them all up again. And that took about 2 weeks to do, ever that many of them. But that's basically a little bit about me and how I got started. And I'm sure others have some very interesting stories of how they got started. But my aunt actually got me started in toy soldiers. Thanks for visiting with me today. Have a good day.